Hello, everyone. So we are live officially. This panel's been a long time coming. We've been trying to put it together. But welcome to the Centralia panel. We are going to be talking about all the things that make this book, Centralia Epicenter, so awesome. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff, too. My name is Cullen Bunn. I am mainly known, if you know me, you probably know me as a comic book writer. I write books such as Harrow County from Dark Horse, The Six Gun from Oni Press, and then a ton of books from Marvel and DC, everything from Uncanny X-Men to Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe to Sinestro. In this case, I wrote the story, The Grasp of Wraiths in Centralia. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I want to go through and introduce the rest. We have the entire, all the writers for the book, which is an awesome feat in and of itself. So we'll go through the list. Adam, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everybody?
Hey, everybody. I'm Adam Cesare. I'm mostly a novelist. I'm mostly a horror author, but I've dabbled in screenplays and comics. But my newest, hottest thing is Clown in the Cornfield. Out now. It is a YA teen slasher from HarperCollins, but you do not need to be a youth in order to enjoy it. So that's my plug. I got a bunch of other books though too.
Yeah,
just thrilled to be here. Yeah, and I wrote A Certain Kind of Forest Sound, the story in Centralia.
All right, Michael, you're up.
I wrote Sundown for Centralia. I'm an indie author, primarily horror nowadays, although I did start off in science fiction, more of the speculative realm end of things. I don't have as big a bio as these other guys, so I think that's about it.
All right. So I've got two Brians here. So we'll go Quinn. You can we'll let you start. We'll let you go first.
Good plan. Save the best for last.
That's right.
I think that's good. My name is Brian Quinn. I'm not primarily known for writing anything, which is great, which really put me in good company here. A little intimidating, but what are you going to do? I'm on the show Practical Jokers, and I wrote Metro with Cullen, which I'm very proud of and very happy about. We're working on more now, and then I wrote G.W. Bolt in the Case of the Grabbed Ghost.
That's right.
That's it.
All right, and Heath.
My name's Heath Amodio. I have literally no bibliography compared to these guys, but I have some things in the works. I run a company called Hustle and Heart Films with Cullen Bunn. We sold 3 shows so far in our first couple years, and we're going to be going out with a few more projects with some amazing partners like Powerhouse Animation and Vertigo Entertainment. And we have several comic books in the works that hopefully we'll be hearing more about, next year. And I wrote Grandma's Eye for Centralia.
And last but not least, Brian Keene.
How you doing? As Cullen said, I'm Brian Keene. I write horror novels, crime novels, fantasy novels. I've got about 50 books out, maybe more than that now. I don't know. I lose track. I write comics for Marvel and DC and some of the indies, and I've worked on such media properties. I've written for Doctor Who, The X-Files, Masters of the Universe, Aliens. And my story in the book is called In the Valley of the Yunwitasundi.
The most difficult to pronounce. Thank you for that. Well, guys, listen. It's an honor for me to have been in this book with you guys. All of us came together because you're all people I like. I like your work, and I wanted to work with you. But this project is really the brainchild is Heath's brainchild. So Heath, why don't you tell us just a little bit about how Centralia Epicenter was born?
All right. Well, I lived in PA for a while, and you can't live in Pennsylvania without hearing about this town that's been on fire for like 60-something years. It's nearly impossible. And I went on to Google it, and as Google tends to do, it gave me everything I wanted or everything I didn't want. But the first thing was Centralia, Illinois. And so I started looking into that. It's like, why is this coming up before the town that's on fire? And it turned out that 114 people had died in a mine collapse. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, what the hell is going on with these Centralia towns? So I started looking into more. And then in Washington State, there was something called the Centralia Massacre, where this parade was taking place. And at the end of the parade, two different factions, one that supported the Nazis in World War II and one that supported obviously everybody else, started shooting each other in the streets. And you know, then the guy who founded the town was hung, and I'm like, what the hell? And then you start going into Centralia, Missouri, and during the Civil War, people were like pulling out guts of soldiers, and like there was another massacre in that town. And the pieces came together where clearly there's something wrong with these Centralia towns where they all have these horrific pasts. And I was like, it's a very easy leap to making that into like this evil epicenter type thing where there's some kind of underground force that's kind of coming up through these Centralias. And then, you know, Colin and I have obviously already been working together, and I was like, look, we got to do something like for this, because it's basically like it can be The Stand, but with 6 different authors telling 6 different stories coming together eventually and facing off against a more major threat in the end. And then it was just a matter of finding the right people to tell the stories. And, you know, Colin was a great help in that and bringing in most of the people. I had a hand in bringing in Brian Keene, but, you know, I couldn't be happier with the team that came together, and the stories were unbelievable. It's exactly what I was hoping for.
Yeah. Listen, those Centralia stories are it's remarkable what's going on out there. I mean, you mentioned Centralia, Missouri, and that massacre was awful, because in my story we talk about how the soldiers slaughtered slaughtered their enemies and then cut them open and stuffed them with cattle bones. And that sounds like something out of some ridiculous science fiction horror story, but that's true. They stuffed them with cattle bones. So that's, what
was the point of it? Like, what was their goal in doing that?
Well, you know, I tried to get into their head a little bit.
Cleaning up, maybe.
And then I just said, you know what, I'm out. It was an act of humiliation, but cattle bones, whatever.
And the fact that Jesse James was involved with that, like back in the day, is crazy too. Like, such a notorious character for the Wild West, yeah. and you see that type of situation that you weren't even aware of is insane. Right.
Yeah, and so I live in Missouri, so it was the perfect choice for me to pick. Heath left it open to us to pick which Centralias we wanted. And since I live in Missouri and that's a horrifying story, I picked Centralia, Missouri for The Grasp of Wraiths. And I introduced in my story, one of the other things I loved about this project was we were all sort of introducing a new sort of paranormal investigator. And if you're like me, you love those kind of characters. I can think of, a dozen that I immediately, when I think of paranormal investigators. What do you guys think? Who are your favorites?
Oof, John Constantine.
Yeah, Constantine's usually
right. Yeah. But I think the X-Files would fall under that too.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Love that show.
Classic old school. You got to go all the way back to the OG Carnacki.
Yeah, Carnacki's great.
But yeah, Carnacki, Manly Wade Wellman's
Silver John,
the Balladeer.
Oh, I never even read that.
Oh, those Silver John stories are so
Silver
great.
John. I'm into it.
And then, modern day, John Constantine and Repairman Jack, probably my 2 favorites.
Oh, Repairman. Yeah, I should have. Yeah, Repairman Jack's a great example.
Would you guys put Van Helsing on that list, or is that?
Sure, I would.
Yeah, right. He's kind of specific, but
yeah, I think I would. That's one of the things I loved is that we were all going to introduce these new characters. For mine, I introduced this necromancer and this, and really he draws a lot of inspiration from Constantine because he is a son of a bitch, and he's this necromancer who's drawn to Centralia, Missouri to help investigate these awful occurrences. But there's something more to him. There's a secret he holds that makes him very dangerous and makes some very powerful forces interested in him. And I like the idea of having this really epic character who has the potential to be this epic character drawn to this small town of Centralia. But I want to hear more. I want to hear about the characters you guys created and the Centralias you used. So we're going to start with Michael. Tell us about your character and your story.
Well, the Centralia I went with was Kansas, which I want to say it was 1901. It was a sundown town. And in the early 1900s, a black family had the temerity to move into this white neighborhood. And when I was invited into the story at the time, everything was going on with the Black Lives Matter and the racial injustice protests. And it just kind of seemed to fit in with that kind of historical resonance. So in Sundown, an occult investigator, she's actually a professor at U of M for occult studies named Hannah Ford. She kind of involves herself in the investigation to find out what happened after a young black teenager is lynched. And she finds out that this tree where he was murdered has some occult symbology engraved into it. And so that's how she gets involved. That's her throughway into this investigation to try and figure out what happens. And the present day murders are linked to what was going on back in the 1900s and the prosecution of black families as a sundown town.
Awesome. Heath, tell us about yours.
Mine was inspired by characters like Carrie and Firestarter, and I knew I wanted a young protagonist with telekinesis powers, and what really started it off with the story was I had an image from what the second story is going to be. That was really disturbing, and I was like, well, now I got to get to that point, and I knew it was good because it actually grossed Colin out. And that takes quite a bit to do. So, I knew I was on the right path. And living in New York, I chose Washington because it's so close. And so it was nice to have a fan reach out and tell me that I nailed the thought process of why is the state always so goddamn wet. Like, that was nice. But, I wanted to tell a tight-knit family story with a really good twist at the end. And I knew I needed to kind of tie the Centralias together in a way. So I tried to make sure that the story led that way. And, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed writing the dialogue of characters that come from different generations and making them interact and sound as natural as possible. So it was a lot of fun. And kind of like Mike's story, Centralia, Washington actually has some history to it where it was founded by a freed slave, and it was one of the first towns founded by a black man, and he ended up being lynched later on over this bridge, which plays a major part in the story. And the fact that this town had almost been wiped out by like 27 major floods, you're like, what's wrong with this town? Because God's clearly trying to get rid of it, right? So I tried to tie that all together in the story, and people seem to like it, which is humbling for sure.
Yeah, it's a great story. You mentioned grossing me out, which makes me think of the first time I met Brian Keene, because I met him. I met him at World HorrorCon years ago, and I only had a couple of short stories even published at that point. And they used to hold these events called the Gross Out Contest, where you get up in front of a room full of hundreds of people, most of them horror writers, and you read the most horrifying, gross material you've ever read. And I decided I was going to enter it this year, even though it was a terrifying event. And I was like the first person. They drew names random. I was the first one to go up, and Brian was drinking a bottle of tequila. He was he was the MC. He was just chugging tequila. And I was so terrified walking up there. And I remember looking at him and I said, "Can I just have some of that tequila?" And I took my shot of tequila and just tore into that short story. And that's how I met Brian Keene.
And it worked because you won, if I remember correctly.
Whoa!
Hey,
wow.
I've won that gross out contest when it was a thing three, four, five times. I don't know.
Wow.
But so Brian Keene, tell us a little bit about your story and your character.
Well, I as far as the Centralia I picked, I live very close to Centralia, Pennsylvania. I only live about an hour away from there, but I spend most of the year in Pennsylvania and part of the year at place in West Virginia. So Centralia, West Virginia was a good choice too. As far as the character, I cheated. When Heath originally approached me, I have a very popular occult detective character. He's this guy who used to be Amish, and he's not Amish anymore. His name's Levi. And, Heath said, can you write a Levi story? And I said, no, if we're going to firm this out and hopefully get it picked up to Hollywood and stuff, I want to keep him separate. So I'll use this other character who was basically trying to keep this as short as possible so we get to Quinn. But I wrote this comic book for Marvel Comics called Devil Slayer. And it was this guy in Iraq, serving in Iraq, and he gets these occult powers. Had all these plans for him, but Marvel only gave me 4 issues, and then they pulled the plug on it. So I basically took him and made him into something very different, and started using him in books under a different name. And when I started writing the story, I decided Heath was right. Levi needed to be in it. So I used both of my occult detective characters. Yeah, that's how I got here.
All right. And Adam, tell us about your karate fighting character.
Well, I had the benefit, I guess, of you guys. Some of you guys had picked your characters, and Cullen had little little log lines, not about the stories, but just about the characters. So I kind of was like, well, if this is The Stand meets kind of Wild Cards meets kind of almost like quasi superhero team, I was like, let me go different. Let me go like very like if Cullen was talking about how epic his character is, how powerful some of these characters are, but when you ask for occult detectives, I said my mind immediately went to Kolchak. Like my mind immediately goes to like Darren McCavin, with a tape recorder, bumbling around rooms. He's just a dude. He's not overpowered. And then I got to pick a Centralia, and it was like, here are the Centralias that are left. And I was like, if Centralia, Texas is in East Texas, which I'm pretty sure it is, I know exactly what I want to do. So I'm a huge Joe Lansdale fan, as Mr. Keene knows. And I was like, well, this is the chance. I never do homages, and I never do riffs on other writer's style. But I was like, if I'm presented with something in East Texas, let me try to do a kind of Lansdalean character, I guess. And Celia is she is a mixed martial artist. It's implied that maybe has some kind of heightened hearing, but it's a very low key superpower, just the idea of just hearing, and it's just very strong. So I had this character, and I wanted to put her in a very kind of street level, very small but supernaturally tinged story. And then with the idea that if we were continuing these characters, things are going to get crazier and crazier for her. So that was where it came. It's a lot of different influences, but mainly the idea that if I was picking Texas for my Centralia, I wanted to honor a great writer from Texas. So
absolutely. And we actually talked to Joe about this book. He had other things going on at the time.
Yeah. I'm the surrogate, Lance. I'll do that.
If Joe had been involved, Heath and I had that conversation. We're like, if Joe's involved, no one else gets Texas. I mean, he's going to command Texas.
Yeah, Joe was involved for him, and he and his son Keith were both involved for a period of time. But
I had the stones
he's
to be
so busy. He's always got a ton going on.
Yeah, and I love all these characters, but I got to tell you, Quinn, your character is the weirdest of the bunch. I think everybody can agree you created the weirdest character. So tell us about G.W. Bolt.
That's saying something with this group.
Yeah.
That's something. I mean, you had, well, first New York. I mean, you had been like, you told me the story. I was in Vegas. I was in the casino at Caesar's Palace when you called, and you're one of the few people I pick up when they call. So I was in and you're telling me the idea, and like you were like 5 sentences in, and I was like, I'm in. But you kept going, and I was like, no, Cullen, I got it. I'm in. I got it. 100%. I got it. I'm in. And then I was in Vegas, and I was trying to think about what I could do for the character. Well, first I wanted New York because I live in New York, and I wish there was a Centralia, Staten Island, because I'm like, that's just what I would like. As close to Staten Island as I can get. So I was like, all right, but nothing happened in Centralia, New York. It's literally there's no like somebody got a parking ticket there like 10 years ago, and that's like the spookiest thing that's happened. So I was like, oh well, fuck it, I can just do whatever I want, I guess then. And then my original idea was it was a ghost. He was because I was thinking detective. I went like Sam Spade, because I had read all those books, and it was going to be a ghost who was trying to figure a way to come back to life. Because I'm really just paranoid about death lately because I just turned 44. I'm middle aged and I'm starting to see it coming. And I was like, then I got obsessed with a toy. I was playing with some toy, and I was like, well, what if this thing is not alive? And then, and that was it. So then I created, so I was like, well, this is a cool idea. What if a toy wanted to be alive and didn't know how it was alive? How terrifying was. And then from that, I built this automaton who's like a metallic man who just wakes up alive one day, and he doesn't know why he's alive, or he can't speak because he wasn't built with a voice box. So he's got to like write stuff on a chalkboard and hold it up, and everybody wants to kill him when they see him because nobody knows what he is. I was like, well, there you go. That sounds like my guy right there. And then that was it. It was about, and that it came together pretty quickly after that. GW Bolt was this beer company mascot who was created by this guy named Chuck Barris, who's named after, it's Charles Barris in the book, but he's named after Chuck Barris, who created the Gong Show and everything like that. And that's it. Like, he comes to life, and his father's already dead, and he doesn't know why he's alive. So he decides to start hunting down the supernatural to get answers about what happens after you die, because he doesn't want to die, and he doesn't even know why he's alive. And that's it. So it's just this weird looking 1930s robot dude in a trench coat trying to figure out what's going on after you die.
That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So I think I don't know if I mentioned or not. Cindy, my lovely wife, is monitoring behind the scenes. She's running the show. We're gonna start taking a few questions from our audience and see what we can get, what kind of nonsense we can talk about here. So we'll hopefully some questions will pop through. If you have questions, folks, shoot them our way. Shoot them in the comments section, and we'll see. Perfect question from Unicorn.
Ooh.
Is will there be another book? So Heath, tell us what you think, man.
Well, it was always planned as at least 3 volumes. I have some weird echo in my ear where I'm hearing myself, and it's tripping.
Sounded like the voice of God for a second. I like
it. Where in the second volume we start to bring these characters together in various other locations and facing other threats or telling other stories, whatever they may be. And then the last volume, everyone would collectively come together and face off against this threat that's obviously been terrorizing the entire country all this time since Civil War era. So hopefully it works out, right? That's the plan anyway.
Yeah, Adam, you mentioned wild cards, and that's what I always think of with this is wild cards or thieves' worlds, where we can tell different stories and we can bring these characters together and have them interact. Reading all your stories, my mind already has started turning. And yeah, the plan's always been, let's do some more of these and tell a bigger story. And this power that Heath is talking about is the dark. I don't know if I'm supposed to mention that, Heath, but I will tell you.
It's been all over.
It's in the intro.
The dark.
I'm having a beverage that I call the dark. I mixed it up right before this.
I like that glass.
Now, I was going to say, do you like the glass?
Yeah, it's holidays. That's my beer company.
Yeah.
Brubson and Horman. I stole half the name for the beer company in the story. Horman, yeah. Based on a real guy from Staten Island.
But yeah, I made a drink called the Dark, which I'll put the recipe in the notes for this video. But it's bourbon and black cherry soda and amaretto and bitters, and shockingly, it's strong enough to kill a mule. And delicious. All right, so let's have
You'll
some
have
more
at least
questions.
4 of them.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm gonna take my hat off. If the glare blinds anyone, please just let me know. I'll put the hat back on. And just get
No. So Barbara's asking. She's from Pennsylvania and wanted to know where Centralia is located. Quinn or Keene, you're right there, man.
Yeah, Centralia, Pennsylvania. It's almost dead center in the middle of the state. I'm down in South Central. I'm down in York County. I'm actually on the border between York County and Lancaster County. I can't remember what county it is in, so I'm Googling it for you right now. That's in Columbia County. So yeah, that's almost dead center. I've been there, probably a good 15, 16 times. My partner, author Mary San Giovanni, she's a big Silent Hill fan, and Silent Hill took its inspiration from Centralia. So we go up there once a year and just walk, and we have photos from every trip. And it's interesting how much it's changed. When we first started going, there were still houses, there was still mining equipment. You could still find spots out in the woods where smoke from the fire would just come right up out of the ground. Awesome. And on this last trip, a lot of that is now gone. There are no more deserted houses. They've all been bulldozed. The fire has moved way out. And even the graffiti highway, which is pretty iconic, that's now gone. They got rid of that big year.
They covered it up with dirt, right?
Dirt and planted trees on top of it.
Wow. Well, that's not going to be haunted at all.
Bunch of haunted trees.
I mean, this is all anecdotal, but I know a guy who used to work for a certain, shall we say, organized crime group. Interviewed him for something I was working on, and according to him, Centralia was like the spot. Everybody talks about the New Jersey Pine Barrens, but apparently there's more people buried in Centralia than there are in the Pine Barrens. I don't know if it's true or not, but it is
for our purposes.
Yeah, it seems to fit. It makes sense.
Yeah, I know it's creepy. It's during the day, it's even creepy. So,
what sort of mining equipment was lying around?
I'm not a miner, so I don't know. Okay. But like the only thing I could ever identify was they left a skid loader just sitting out there, and it looks like it's sitting in the middle of the woods. And you have to remember, there used to be a town there,
right,
and factories, and now there's not. It's just overgrown. It really is what Earth would be like after a nuclear war, after some form of apocalypse. Like, you'll be walking through what you think is woods, and you'll trip over a cement curb, or there's a fire hydrant right next to this huge oak tree, and you realize, oh, this used to be a suburban street.
Huh.
That's crazy.
But
so Magic Tonks, if that's your real name, it's the most awesome name ever. Is asking, are all the characters in the books eventually going to link up? And yeah, that's kind of the plan. Is that these characters could slowly start to enter the orbit of each other. So my character and Michael's character could interact in a story, and then I think, Heath, you said this, but the idea is we'll do a couple of more books, and in the third book, then there's the big gathering of these characters where they're all interacting in different ways with this powerful force, the dark. Cheers to the dark.
Yeah, it'll be our Avengers basically. But obviously, right, there's some logistics to work out, and to get 6 different characters from 6 different writers who are also doing other things besides writing this book. But I'm sure it'll all come together. We got a lot of great creators on this, so I'm not concerned. And when
Yeah,
it does, it'll be amazing.
I deliberately, knowing that was the ultimate, I deliberately hinted at it in my story. You know, when Levi tells Bloom, you know, those of us in this life, we're kind of loners. It would be nice to work with somebody for a change, you know, knowing ultimately this is where we'd be going.
Yeah. So Peaceful Mountain, a vast difference from Magic Tonks. I'm assuming it's the same person using two different names, very different names. Asked, how many truly believe in the paranormal and how many have had paranormal experiences? And let's hear about them. So let's start with Quinn. Are you a believer?
I would like to believe. I've never had anything definitively happen that's ever led me to believe that anything's going on. But my grandmother, who was notably a crazy old Italian woman, swears that she saw ghosts and stuff like that. So it's hard for me to discount my grandmother saying it. But for the most part, I just haven't had any experiences that work in believing it. And I'm also one of those guys that just gets like, I mean, if you read the story, you see it like, I'm just like, wow, when we die, the lights just go off. How horrible is that? So no, I really would love to. That's why I think I even wrote in the book where I'm like, why would anybody be afraid of ghosts? I was like, that's evidence that something else is going on. Like, I wish I could see a ghost. I would love a poltergeist to come in here and start wrecking shop. Because all I'd have to do is move. But when I move, I'd be like, holy crap, there's life after death. Like, that poltergeist didn't come from nowhere. So I would invite any poltergeist out there that are looking for a place to chill.
Right.
Yeah, you know, come hang out. I'll take it. But no, I haven't seen anything as of yet.
All right. Michael, are you a believer?
Not really. I'm wearing an X-Files shirt, but yeah,
The truth is out there, Mo.
that's what I hear. I am more Scully in reality than Mulder. I want to believe, but I haven't quite been able to make that leap. Closest experience I ever had when we bought the house we're living in now, the previous owner was put into a rest home. And about a year or two after she passed away, after we moved in, I was in the kitchen, standing at the fridge, opened it up, and I felt like somebody like flick the back of my neck. And I was the only one in the room. So that scared the fuck out of me. And I immediately got out of the room, but then started rationalizing, like, okay, it was just like a nervous twitch or a nerve fired. It was just something weird.
Right.
But there's that little, well, maybe, what if?
All right. Adam?
I believe in the supernatural because of Michael's story. So
I
was gonna be on Team Quinn, and then I changed my answer to now.
He does that.
I had a similar like very like when I was in either junior high or high school. Like I had a very similar like I like kind of halfway tricked myself into thinking I saw something, and like being like, was that something? Was that a ghost? Like it couldn't have been no one was in this room with me. Like, so I kind of hang on to that hope, hang on to that weird, glimpse of like ghost socks that I once got. Like, and I'm like, yeah, maybe I can't close the door completely on that. That's where I fall.
Heath?
In a way, like I used to go with our local radio station during October. We'd go to these haunted places and, investigate them on the air. And we went to this place called Lundy Road, where this house, the entire family, it was like a murder-suicide. The father killed his family and then hung himself. And the entire building, except for this one entranceway, everything is concreted shut. So it's pitch dark no matter what time of day you're in there. And we went through the house, very, very creepy. We decided to go into the basement. I was like, wait, let me just switch out the batteries to a fresh one. So I switched out, got a brand new battery. And the second we stepped in the basement, and went, boom. So I'm like, holy shit. And they're like, you can't say that on the air. I'm like, do you understand what just happened? Like, the battery just died in 2 seconds. And what's really crazy about this house is like a couple 100 feet away in the woods, there's this town that was wiped out twice by smallpox. So like the whole area is just got to be messed up. And then my friend Dre from the show and we decided to stay overnight there and invited a couple girls that we wanted to hang out with. they surprisingly said
There you
yes.
go. Well, there you go.
So you know, so but so we're recording on with the
this
the
I
night-
believe in.
Yeah, exactly. So we're recording with the night vision on, right? And it's pitch black. There's no light. And
I'm with you so far.
focus,
Heath.
gentlemen. And we're focused on the supernatural part of the story. And there's shadows. You can see from the footage there's shadows on the wall. And you're like, how are there shadows in a room with no light? Right? So you know, it was pretty incredible. I want to believe in it. Like when I want one to like tap me on the shoulder, you know, I want one to say, hey, let's hang out. Like that'd be cool. Like it hasn't happened yet though. That's as close as I've gotten.
But after this, we're probably all going to get an email from Heath for the Centralia erotic thriller line.
Centralia colon night vision. Yeah.
We got to hook that. We got to hook that
Bigfoot
50 Shades of Grey audience up.
Right. Keene, what about you? Are you a believer?
I wrote a
book
book
on it.
about this year. It's called The Triangle of Belief. It's out now in paperback and digital. It's very thin. You can read it in a night. To make it very quick, I was a believer when I was a kid. I think when you're a kid, you believe in everything. Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, Bigfoot, ghosts, you believe in it all. And I thought I had a supernatural experience as a kid. But then you get older and you stop believing in Santa Claus. You stop believing in the Tooth Fairy. You stop believing in that stuff. Until 2 or 3 years ago, when 3 giant frigging black triangles flew over our house. Saw them clear as day. You know, I'm ex-military, so I knew a little bit about what I was seeing. And what I was seeing, we supposedly do not have the technology to put in the air. This thing should have been falling and crushing our house, but they flew right by. And that made me start reevaluating a lot of the things from my childhood. And yeah, I am a believer. I believe there's scientific explanations for it, and I'm not a believer in everything. You know, but I what is the paranormal? It's just something scientific that we haven't evolved enough to explain yet. That's all it is.
Yeah.
I like that description.
So for me, I grew up in the country. And you do not grow up in the country without a healthy respect to ghosts. And in addition to growing up in the country, my dad was for many years a professional hypnotist, and I have seen my dad do things that I cannot possibly just explain away. I mean, just bizarre things. And I've seen it rain frogs. And I've seen it, I've seen things that are, supernatural in origin, that in my mind's eye, at least. And like you, Brian, a few years back, my wife and I were in North Carolina visiting my parents. And on a dark night, we were driving down this back road and I saw a light. We saw a light moving across the sky. And I don't know how to explain it, except to say it was moving so fast and so smooth. It wasn't like a plane. It was just moving just as smooth as it could be. And then other cars were seeing it because their brakes were, flashing. People were stopping. And then just out of nowhere, just straight up, 90-degree angle, out of nowhere, just went straight up and gone. And I've, I was in San Diego one year, and my friend Jimmy Z, who is a comic writer, and he owns a comic shop in Cuba, Missouri. Shout out to Jimmy Z. Was watching our house, and Cindy used to believe that the house was haunted by her father. And he messaged me and said, "What's going on here?" He said, "A few minutes ago, I walked out of your kitchen. I just walked back in," and he took a picture, and every cabinet and every drawer was open. Now, I either believe Jimmy was just messing with me, or he walked out and he came back in and all the cabinets and all the drawers were open. So, there's more things in heaven and earth. More things in heaven and earth.
I
And
heard, Cullen, a rumor that your house is haunted by the ghost of Jason Momoa. Is this true?
yeah,
This is what I've heard.
the ghost of Jason Momoa haunts our house. Ever since, I went on a convention a few years back, and one of Cindy's friends planted pictures of Jason Momoa all over the house. Thousands of Jason Momoa. And I still find them taped to corners and under the toilet, the lid of the toilet. They're everywhere. So yes. Will there be illustrations of the characters in the next Centralia book? I would love to see that. I think that's a great idea. I mean, we had talked about doing illustrations in this edition, doing story illustrations. It just didn't come together. But I could see us doing illustrations of some of these characters.
I would love to. You know, Walt Flanagan, who I do Tell 'em Steve Dave with, and you know, he's done work for DC. He's on Comic Men. He read the GW Bolt story and sent me this illustration of his version of it, and I was just blown away, man. It got me so excited and hopeful to see more illustrations of the character. I fell in love with it.
Absolutely. And I'm sure, you know, look, there's a lot of artistic people who read this book and follow us. So if you have an artistic bone in your body and want to draw some of these characters, send them to us because we'd all love to see them, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there was a fan one that was really nice too that was posted on Twitter.
Yeah. So Michael, this question's for you. Was there a reason you didn't include Hollow Earth as part of the Thule Nazi lore you did? It felt like it would have fit perfectly.
There wasn't a specific reason to exclude it. I just didn't really want to explore that aspect of it. There are some very, very light references in Sundown to another series that I write called the Salem Holly books.
Which is an awesome series. Just to interrupt, it's an awesome series. I love them. You should check them out because they're great.
Thank you. That I'll pay you later.
Thank you.
So I was in the midst. I think I had already written the third book by the time I got to Sundown, and some of that element gets played out in book 3, and I didn't want to repeat myself too much with Sundown. So that is probably the primary reason. And I also didn't quite have a clear picture then of how Centralia as an overarching story would be progressing in books 2 and 3 and maybe more. So I didn't really want to jump the gun and step on too many toes.
It's all Hollow Earth all the time.
Yes.
Q. Is your character based on you at all? A lifeless automaton?
I didn't think so until you said it, and now I'm kind of seeing it. Only in his extreme distaste for death. He takes care of himself very well. I don't really take care of myself very much at all physically, whereas he does. Not really. I mean, when I was rereading it recently, it's weird because he lives in a basement in this abandoned house that he kind of made into a workable area. And I was like, holy shit, like the next story after this pandemic, I'm like, I know how a lot of suddenly a lot of things that I was writing were like, I started thinking the next couple of stories we could do with them. And it was like based on what I'm going through now, but there's really nothing much in him and me aside from a hatred of death. I don't look as cool as him, and or anything like that.
Can you do the robot?
I can, but it's not a great one. It's just serviceable.
I don't think anybody's robot is as good as they think it is. So that's all right. All right. So this is for any or all of us from Jamie Brock. How did you derive a story from a character, or did you start with a storyline and then build the character? That's a good question. Let's start with Adam.
Yeah, like I said, I kind of got. It's hard. It's kind of both at the same time because I was able to. I had that heads up, and I had that kind of. I don't know how y'all write, but when I write, if I'm given any kind of prompt, like I find things so much easier if I'm given like a tell me a story about vampires. If I'm given any kind of like just anything to go on, the smallest thing, like tell me a story that involves a shoe in some way, like something like so. Like I had like the most heads up in the world, where it's like, okay, well, they're going to be about Centralia. They're going to connect to like a larger cosmic darkness, have Texas, and like I saw what the other characters were, so I was able to kind of, I feel like out of voice, maybe, like the idea that like all the stories are told in very different ways. And that's not something I had a heads up on. But I was like, okay, well, when I think of like Quinn was saying, like Sam Spade, like when I think of like a very noir voice, when I think of like a kind of a crime writing voice, and when I think of Lansdale's voice, and when I think like that kind of informed what kind of story it was going to be. Yeah, so that like the character and the story all kind of built out of that prompt of Texas Centralia, and some of us had very eventful Centralias where a lot of stuff historically has happened, and Centralia, Texas is barely a town. Like it's an unincorporated town. So like I was able to just like, I'm like, this is just, if you go to Google Maps, it's just a big chunk of Davy Crockett National Forestry, and I was like, that's great. Nature hike, that's perfect. So I was given a lot more stuff to chew over and a lot more prompts than I usually start a story with. So Google Maps, and away we go. Yeah.
How about you, Keene? How did you start this one?
It was a balancing act. All I had to go on was Centralia, West Virginia. So research the town, know it enough to effectively write about it. And then it was, I was very conscious of, I need to write something that's going to satisfy my longtime readers, but something that's going to satisfy folks who have never read one of my books before and don't know anything about these two characters. And it occurred to me that I could set this exactly a week after my novel, A Gathering of Crows, and it would fit perfectly in the timeline. So my readers would like that. And new readers who don't know A Gathering of Crows exists would be able to follow along as well. The other thing I struggled with, I wanted, a creepy antagonist, a good monster, but I also knew I wanted to hint that there was something more out there, so that eventually we could tie all these together. But I don't think any of us at that point really knew what else was out there. I mean, you didn't invent that drink until tonight, Cullen.
It's gonna stick with you.
So I tried to set up, a little bit of, with the whole ley line being infected. Hey, this might be happening somewhere else,
Right.
On Earth too. So yeah, it was a balancing act for sure.
And for people interested in that kind of, behind the scenes, how you put the story together, Brian, you just posted on your Patreon a really cool series of posts about developing a story from the ground up.
Yep.
And that's great. If you're interested in that kind of thing, that was a great series of articles in how you come out of nowhere and build a story. Laura is asking us, how did you decide the order in the of the stories in the book? Heath, do you know the answer to that?
Honestly, the only reason mine went first is because I knew that I mentioned Centralia as like a broader universe. And
we know
introduced the dark, and I knew that.
You sent that book.
I honestly, I was the one with the least amount of published work. What?
I said you sent that book. You sent the book to those girls that you invited out to the meetings in the woods to impress them.
That's exactly it.
Ladies.
That's exactly it. Yeah, and then the rest just kind of fell into place, honestly.
Awesome. All right. Do we still have more?
I just got to step away, guys. I don't feel well real quick.
Oh,
all right.
All right.
Feel better.
Feel better, Heath.
Take care.
He's done with you all.
We lost Heath.
He might be back. Is there a signed limited edition of the book or just paperback? So I can answer this one. For right now, it's just paperback. Heath and I have discussed doing sort of a collector's edition, but it'll probably not be until we've done more of these Centralia books, and then we can collect everything into like a collector's edition. That'll be really nice and something impressive. Avni Patel asks us, aside from the story you wrote, which of the other stories or characters would you say is your favorite? What a mean thing to make us answer.
It's the end of Reservoir Dogs.
Let's all say Heath. Heath. I love Heath.
That's why he left. He abandoned us. All right, we're gonna answer it though. All right, does anybody want to tackle this one?
I mean, I dug them all. I did. Quinn's story, and I saw a commenter in the comments kind of echo this. I'm a huge Doom Patrol fan.
Oh,
I've been lucky enough to write Doom Patrol, just one issue, but I got to put my name on it. Your GW reminded me a lot of Cliff Steele.
robot.
So I dug that. Adam, I'm a sucker for anything Lansdale. And Michael, I love me some Nazi pulp. No, I liked all of them,
All right, Brian took the hit on that one for us. So there you go.
Can I ask Brian a question about his character? Because Brian, have you ever? You said you took the character from the Marvel comic. That was one of the Marvel Max lines, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah, I had all those. That was great. Have you ever not owned Levi? Do you know what I mean? Like, has Levi ever appeared in something where you're not he's not completely creator owned? I'm just interested.
Oh no, he's completely creator owned. And let me clarify, Bloom is creator as well. Bloom, all the stories I've written with Bloom are what I would have done with Devil Slayer had Marvel decided to greenlight it beyond a 4-issue Max series. Unfortunately, they didn't, and I get it. I don't know that character would have fit in with what Marvel's doing these days anyway. But there were all these stories that I thought, boy, somebody with this military background and PTSD and fighting all these paranormal things, that's just too good not to do something with. So, but yeah, both Bloom and Levi are creator owned. So
that's awesome. All right, I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. So depending on how they want to make us fight each other.
Wait, I saw a couple people mention my cat. That is Whiskers. She's actually not my cat. She is my ex-wife's cat. During the quarantine, I'm living with my girlfriend, my ex-wife, and my youngest son. It actually works out very well. But she is kind of bonded with me. She's in my office pretty much when I'm in the office. So that was her that kept popping up.
All right.
I love a good cat.
Yes, you do.
The reason I've had to move downstairs for all like any Zooms or even dinner party and stuff like that, which is this at-home show we do, is because my cat Brian Benjamin he's 17 now, and he's just a cranky old dude.
Yeah,
so he just screams. Like if he was here and I wasn't petting him, you wouldn't even be able to focus or concentrate. He just screamed. He'd get right in my face and scream for attention. And stuff like that. So I get it, bud. When I saw you pick up that cat, I know what the struggle is like, bud.
My cat, Mad Max, unfortunately I had to put him down earlier this year, cancer. But he was the same way. 15, cranky old man, and he'd be up here on the back of the chair, just howling in my ear.
I love it. It's great.
All right, so Aaron is asking us a very thought-provoking question here. Is there anything that starts to scare you or freak you out if you think about it too much that you want to write about? So let's start. Keene, you're nodding, so let's start with you.
Well, I'm nodding, but then I reread the question. I actually heard it a little different. There's stuff that scares me and freaks me out that I won't write about these days, that I would have written about 10, 15 years ago. Quinn mentioned earlier, you're 44 this year. I turned 53 this year, and my audience keeps complaining that I'm getting more mellow with age. That it's not this crazy gonzo, gross out, ultraviolet stuff anymore. And I agree, it's not, because it's hard for me to get into that headspace. I'm a dad. I find the older I get, if I turn on a horror movie or I start a book and bad things are happening to kids, I have to turn it off. I can't deal with it anymore. It freaks me out.
Yeah. Huh. Michael?
Pretty much the same boat. As my oldest is 5, my youngest is 3, so relatively new parent. Still feels like I'm on training wheels with that. One of the first extreme horror things that I published was mass hysteria. And I was writing that while my wife was pregnant with our first child. And after that little guy came along, I was like, I can't put this out into the world. Like, I can't even read it. So I had to put it in a drawer for a few years before I got comfortable enough to go ahead and release it. But I don't think I would really write anything like that again, or at least not as like a serious take. Which is not to say mass hysteria is all that serious to begin with, but it definitely took me into some places where I'm not comfortable going again.
All right. Adam?
Well, I don't know. I guess as far as like subject matter, as far as things like that, I kind of think nothing's off limits. This could be that I'm not a father. I just have a geriatric dog who's barking downstairs. I can't hear. But I'm so of the opinion, like, I can do any kind of horror as long as it's done well, kind of thing. Like, as both a reader and a person who enjoys the occasional horror movie, I really can kind of stomach anything. And I've recently turned to writing young adult fiction, which I know Cullen has some recent experience with that, and I found it kind of freeing to be like, well, if there's going to be no MPAA rating on this, like, why don't I try to put myself remember what it was like to be a teenager? It wasn't all that long ago, and like, what would be the scariest thing that could happen to me? And I think that's a very different answer. In the last 20 years, it's a very different answer for America's teenagers. So like, yeah, I guess there's nothing really. Like, I wrote about clowns. I wrote about I wrote about cannibals. I wrote about aliens. Like, I'll take it all. So
How about you, Quinn?
I agree. There's not really much. The only thing is, you guys ever read an author named Charlie Houston? I hear about him. He wrote a book called, I love his books. He hasn't written anything in a while, but I do love his books. And he wrote a book called Caught Stealing. And in it, he has this cat, and these gangsters are trying to get information. They start torturing the cat. And up until that point in my life, I had never seen anything I used to watch Faces of Death as a kid. I used to I was that guy, you know what I mean? With the Freddy Krueger t-shirt and all that stuff. And I loved it. And nothing ever bothered me. But after I read that, the way he wrote it, I was, and I think this is even before I owned the cat. So it wasn't even like I'm just a cat guy and that's it. Like it turned me off so much, man, that I don't think I could write about animals getting hurt or shit like that. I think
that's just it. You hit on it. I was the same way. Faces of Death, Traces of Death. I watched all that shit, and I was the weirdo at the party that would slip it onto the VCR whenever the DJ got quiet. But, you get older, and Adam, you'll know exactly where I'm going with this. Adam and I have a friend, film director Mike Lombardo, and he's in the back of my car raving about this movie he just seen called A Serbian Film. Now, I'm not going to describe it. You folks that are watching this live stream, you have access to Google. You can go read for yourself what A Serbian Film is about. But he's describing this to me, and I'm up front, and I realized, yep, I'm officially old because I have no desire to see this. I'm out,
Yeah. Oh, I read about Serbian film, and that's a good example because I was like, I don't ever want to see this.
Yeah, I support the filmmaker's right to make the movie, and people can certainly watch the movie. I don't need that imagery in my head,
Yeah,
agree.
Yeah, I think I don't like to think that there's anything I won't write about, but there may be, and I haven't stumbled onto it yet. And there's stuff that I just don't gravitate to as a creator. But I agree with those of you who said, becoming a dad or being a dad changes you, because on Halloween, I always watch like a horror movie a night at least. And this year, I popped in the adaptation of Stephen King's The Mist. And I got about, 45 minutes. And I love that movie. I mean, I think it's a great movie. I got about 45 minutes into it, and I said to myself, I can't watch this. I can't watch how it ends. I can't manage it tonight.
Right. They changed the ending of the movie, right? They made it.
Yeah.
Right.
The ending to me is one of the most horrifying things I think as far as a horror movie, it's awful.
It's brutal.
I mean, it's really hard to watch, and I just couldn't do it. I just knew going into it, as much as I love that movie, I knew I couldn't watch the rest of it. And so, there we go. I couldn't do it. And being a dad's made me
soft. Weak.
Weak. All right, guys. So thank you all for joining me. But let's before we go, I want all of you just to tell everybody where to find you. First of all, Centralia Epicenter is on Amazon right now. You can get it on Kindle. You can get it in print. So check that out. It's easy to find. You can search our names, search Centralia Epicenter, and you can grab that book. If you haven't read it, you really should. It's awesome. But I want to just tell everybody, what you're up to, what you've got coming down the line, and where they can find you online. So we'll start with Adam.
If my name's on the screen, it's Adam Cesare. It's pronounced like the salad, but it looks all weird in Italian. Just I'm on Twitter. I'm on YouTube. I do a YouTube review show where I talk about a movie and a book basically every week. Please check out my stuff, and please buy Centralia. Yeah.
Michael?
You can find me on Twitter at MikeH5856 or hit up my website, michaelpatrickhicks.com. I also co-host the podcast Staring into the Abyss, which comes out every Thursday. So new episode tomorrow. We'll be talking about Brian Keene's Urban Gothic.
Oh, nice.
Awesome.
Fucking love that book.
Quinn.
Yeah.
Tell us all about where we can find you and what you're up to.
You can find me on Twitter or the regular stuff at BQ Quinn with 2 Qs. And if you want to find me, all you got to do is turn on True TV at basically any point in the day and wait 20 minutes, and I'll be on your screen. I promise you. Other than that, I do Tell 'em Steve Dave, a podcast that we've been doing, me and Brian and Walt, for 10 years now, and that comes out every week. That's I don't remember the website. You just search Tom Steve Dave, it'll come up. And that's it. Just more of the same for me for years and years coming your way. So get ready.
Keene?
You can find me right here in my office, listening to Tell 'em Steve Dave, listening to Howard Stern every day. If neither one of those are, then I've usually got music blaring in the background.
Do you hear Howard sounds for 5 more years?
I was listening live yesterday.
Yes.
I mean, selfishly, look, if anybody has earned a retirement, it's that man. But selfishly, yeah, I'm glad. And I know my good buddy Richard Christie, I don't know if you're watching the stream or not, but I'm happy for him because it means he's got a job for another 5 years.
He's got a kid on the way too, right?
Yeah. No, BrianKeene.com. I'm all over social media. The only one I really use, though, is Twitter. But yeah, you can holler at me on Twitter and I'll holler right back at you. So,
so Heath had to bow out, unfortunately, but you can find him at the other Heath on Twitter. So if you want to look him up. And then as for me, you can find me on Twitter is where I'm probably most active. It's at Cullen Bunn. I have a newsletter. I have a website. I have a Patreon. You can find me there. I had 2 books come out today. If you haven't checked them out, 2 new books. Piecemeal, which is a horror comic about some high school kids that find a brain in an old abandoned house and take that brain home, and hijinks ensue. And then on the other side of the spectrum is Bite Sized, which is a kid's book about a group of rambunctious robots who escape their government lab and end up in a suburban family's home on Christmas Eve. So you can check both of those out. They just came out today. Otherwise, I've got tons of books coming out, down the line. But definitely check out Centralia Epicenter if you haven't yet. I think we've got some cool stuff. I know there's some cool stories in that book, and I think we've got some really cool stuff planned for everybody. But other than that, thank you all for joining us. Thank you guys for joining me here in this broadcast. And stay tuned. We'll be doing more soon.
See ya.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Guys.